Designing the perfect logo is hard, like really hard, much harder than I expected. But what makes that process much easier and more enjoyable is working on it with a human, an expert human who you can actually have conversations with. Mix in a little bit of patience, a lot of creativity, a dash of psychology, and thankfully some sense of humor as well. And my guest today will come up with magic. She's been a graphic designer since 2003 and started her own design company in 2018. She specializes in branding and logo design, illustration and advertising, as well as a variety of print-based and digital designs. Welcome to the show, Katie Sinkowski.
Thank you. that was a lovely little introduction. I like that.
I mean, you don't have to answer this honestly, depending on how the answer is going to go. But on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being like the most frustrating client that you've ever worked with, was I like, I was like an 8 or a 9, wasn't I?
No, not at all.
Oh, I was a 12. Is that what you're trying to say?
No. You were very, like, honestly, I know I said this a bunch of times when we were working together, but like, there's absolutely no worry. Like you were not difficult whatsoever. I know it can be a challenging process sometimes to dig in there.
I found Katie here on Instagram. I saw posts and you're local to where I am. And I really liked some of the stuff that you had done. So I thought, okay, I'm going to reach out to her and talk to her about redoing the VOpreneur logo. And I think that my initial consult with you was, I need a logo. I have absolutely no idea what I want. I have absolutely no ideas to offer to the creative process whatsoever. Can you make me a really awesome logo? So that was about it. And somehow you managed to pull it off. So I commend you for that. Now, before we get into the graphic design and logo stuff, I noticed when I was doing some research that you have traveled to 21 different countries around the world, which is something I'm a little jealous of. So I'm curious, were you traveling for business or pleasure? And let's go with one of the most memorable places that you've visited and your favorite food experience.
Okay. So at pleasure, I've always I feel like I had a grandfather. I worked at our hardware store growing up, and he waited till very late in life to start traveling. And so I kind of learned from him that I wanted to make sure I traveled kind of throughout life and not just leave it for the unknown at the end, right? So I've traveled to 21 different countries. My favorite, I would say, was actually, I've loved everywhere I've gone. I wouldn't say I've ever, like, I'd go back to anywhere I've been, but South Africa was actually my favorite place that I've been. I went by myself. And I think that also is one of the reasons I liked it so much, was because I had to completely come out of my shell and meet people and just sort of embrace the whole experience on my own. And I think it just always stood out to me. I also had an experience. I'd gone on, so what I did, I traveled over there. I met up with somebody who was from there, and then they traveled around with me for almost a month. And we went on a safari at, like, just the two of us in his truck, and a lioness came out of the grass. And she kind of stopped, and his windows in his truck didn't really work properly. So I'm like leaning out the truck, taking pictures of her. And she walked up and sat literally right beside me. Her head was like here. And I just sat really quietly and stilly. And she just looked up at me, and it just seemed like one of those moments in like a movie that either she's going to snag me or we have
this is how it ends, or this is going to make for a great story one day.
Yeah. So we had this beautiful connection moment, and
nice.
And that would be one of my favorite trips that I've taken for sure.
That's awesome. Okay, best food experience, because for me, whenever I'm going anywhere, and I haven't been a lot of places, but whenever I'm going anywhere, the very first thing I do is try to find a good place to eat.
Okay. So I'm a vegetarian. So usually my experience is like especially in a place like that where they're not used to that. It's like I find that people can get pretty creative with all kinds of vegetables and beans and rice and grains and stuff. And I always find it interesting Costa Rica, I would actually say had the best food for me that way, because those are all kind of staples in their food anyway. So they were able to make me something that was still
nice. There's a lot of fancy ways that you can turn cauliflower into steak. I have learned this from the Food Network over the years. So there's ways to make it happen. All right. So apart from designing the VOpreneur logo, which was, probably like a career high moment for you, I'm sure, was one of the coolest projects that you've ever got to work on? One of the most memorable things that you've got to do?
Oh, that's a really good question.
I have to be very careful here so I don't upset my other clients.
Exactly. I would say actually, when I went out on my own into my own business, I can't necessarily think of like a project right off the top of my head that stands out. It's more the fact that I love the chance that I get to work with all different kinds of businesses.
Yeah.
So it's not like I can literally go from working like for a brewery like Hometown Brew to a trucking company like Scotland to someone like yourself that I don't know a lot about that industry and I get to learn about it, and or like a hair salon or something, like just very varied as far as like what the industry is, or if it's masculine or feminine or aggressive, or like, you know what I mean? Like it's just, there's a whole different flavor to working on my own. And I think because I do so much branding, that I've been able to do so many different types of businesses. And my thing has always been, I don't design for me. I want to get to know you and your business so that I can properly reflect who you are. Obviously there's still going to be my artistic, creative, flair to it. Like,
sure.
But at the end of the day, it's very different than like a fine art or something where it's like someone's commissioning you for a painting. It's like, no, this is supposed to be you, and I'm just helping, bring what I can to the table.
There's some similarities, I think, to the voiceover side. Because for me, I mean, one of my favorite parts about this industry is that every day I'm waking up and I don't know what I'm going to do on a given day. I could be working on a commercial. I could be working on a corporate video. I could be working on an e-learning piece. I could be working on some sort of broadcast piece. Like, you never know. And so every day is a new fun challenge or mystery or whatever, which I really enjoy, because I was clearly not cut out for the monotony of a regular 9 to 5. I want that variation and working with different people, experiencing different types of business. It's part of the joy of this, and it sounds like you get that with what you're doing as well. And I mean, I can see from looking through your portfolio, you've worked on a lot of different stuff. So for most voice actors, it seems like the very first thing they do after they purchase their microphone is they design a logo and a business card. And in most cases, I've been working with voice actors as a marketing coach for like a decade now. And I think that about 90% of those logos are basically the same. I think probably about 70% of those use the same microphone clip art. And so I'm just curious, how do we think deeper and more intentionally about the logo design process rather than just grabbing that, traditional microphone clip art thing that that's where we all tend to default, myself included in the beginning?
Yeah. I think that whether it's a personal brand or a business brand, you have to consider that your logo speaks on your behalf when you're not there, right? So I think that's why I enjoy doing that for people, is that how do we make it speak for who you are when you're not there, right? So if your logo doesn't stand out from somebody else's, you're just kind of blending in with the crowd, right? So I think that, and it can be small little things that help separate your logo. Like, obviously there's only so many ways to do things, or so many shapes or whatever, right? Or so many colors. But at the end of the day, your logo still invokes some sort of mood or to the style of it or whatever, right? So there's still, I think the difference between finding something online and working with a person to actually portray what that feeling or mood or style is for you. I forget how you asked the question at the beginning.
Just thinking deeper about the process and you know, how do we come up with it? And I guess part of it, like you said, is it's identifying who you are as a brand and figuring out a way to maybe visually tell that story in some way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then eventually, like even you think of brands like, say someone like National Geographic, who now they have that yellow square and everyone just knows that that's a National Geographic show or whatever. You see that icon and you know. So that's how much like a brand can literally speak on your behalf without even words, right? Like it's literally a yellow box and somehow we know that that's what it's for. Or you see commercials for like obviously iconic brands like Coca-Cola or whatever, right? And you know that like
you just know.
Yeah. So, and sometimes it can be like even at the Christmas time, you see Santa come out and all that stuff, right? And it's like, but you know, it's still a Coca-Cola commercial. It's like there's obviously not just with the logo, but with like all of your branding, there has to be cohesiveness to what it is that you're what it is that is speaking on your behalf, I guess, when you're not.
I've had 20 versions of my voiceover logo, which are all just whatever, something that I've put together because I've never really prioritized it. Because my argument, I guess, in some senses was always like, nobody's ever hired me or fired me as a result of my logo. So, you know, what difference does it really make? But I wanted to do something as an experiment. When the VOpreneur logo was created, you know, we did this, you know, I did this together over the, you know, few months. It came out a month ago or whatever. I wanted to start putting the logo out there, but not actually tell anybody, because I wanted to see, does it make a difference? Is anybody actually paying attention? Will anybody actually notice? Or is it just, you know, a thing that's there or whatever? And within 10 minutes of posting it in the first place, I had a bunch of different messages from people. Like they noticed right away. And I've had a bunch of messages coming since as I've continued to put it out into different social media platforms or whatever. And so I was like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Maybe people actually are paying attention to this. Like maybe it does actually speak. And so that was a really interesting experiment for me to do, because now obviously at some point I'm going to have to hire you to do a voiceover logo for me, because now I realize that, wow, these things really make a difference. These things really matter. And my logo's like, whatever, it's my name. Like, whoa, great deal of thought and effort went into that. But it was interesting to see people do pay attention and people do notice. And I guess the other thing that was good about that for me too, was it meant that it obviously spoke to them on some level, because it wasn't, they were reaching out like, what the heck is that? Or whatever. It was like, wow, this is really cool. We really like the new design or whatever. And so that was really encouraging for me to see that. And hopefully that's encouraging for you as well, because I know we talked about, you know, if you're going to launch it, let me know if you're going to launch it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to launch it or if I just kind of want to float it and see what happens. And so I floated it and saw what happened. And I was very happy with the results of that.
Good. Yeah, I think it's like, I don't know, it's like the whole term of like dress for the job, or, you know, like I think that you're, there's a professionalism to having like a not polished look isn't the right way to say it, but just that it's a package.
It gives you consistent. How do you get that recognition? Mm-hmm. Right. You know, you talked about National Geographic in the square. They don't get that recognition unless they've got this one thing that they use, and it's absolutely everywhere. And eventually we just associate yellow square, National Geographic. If you don't have something for your brand, whether it's an image, a logo, you know, colors, like, I mean, I'm wearing orange. I'm associated. Everybody knows orange is my color. That's my thing. And so there's an association that's been built up over time from consistently using that color in my brand. And so now everybody's like, oh, as soon as anybody sees anything orange, I'm assuming that they think of me. I mean that in the least narcissistic way as possible. As soon as I said it, I was like, wow, that sounds really bad. But it's part of the association that comes with it, and comes with building a brand identity. So,
and that's just it, right? I think that like even like rebranding is kind of a whole other piece. like, and again, not to keep name dropping National Geographic, I don't work for them or anything, but like,
but we might when we're done.
The whole yellow square obviously comes from like that. Their magazine always had that yellow border, right? So John Deere is another example I always use of rebranding, where if you go through like 100 years of their logo, it went from a really detailed illustration of a deer to now this more abstract deer that you don't even have to see the words John Deere with it. You see the green, you see that deer, you know, right? So
you just know. Yep.
There's usually some sort of consistency to a brand over time that lets you keep recognizing it too, right? So yeah, like if in your case it's orange, then like, you know, you keep following that through too, right? But yeah.
When we worked together on the VOpreneur logo, I commented to you a couple of times that I was surprised at the amount of psychology that can go into the design process. And at times I felt like I was signing up for like a quasi brand therapy session or something like that, which I didn't know I needed, but clearly I did. And it was really good. So do they teach you that at design school? Do they teach you how to walk the crazies through the therapy part of the logo design process? It's not just shapes and colors. And because it was like, there was some stuff, you said some stuff and I was like, holy crap, that's incredibly profound. I never thought about it that way. I was really surprised at how deep you can get into this stuff.
So I think that I took art history and art design fundamentals in school as well. And there is a piece of like, obviously what colors can do for you, right? Like certain colors like if you were doing a logo for a healthcare professional, you probably wouldn't use green because usually our minds associate that with sickness or illness, right? So you'd more likely to use colors that would think of something more positive. So there's definitely color theory and that kind of stuff. I would say, I don't know if, as far as a lot of the psychology stuff, I actually was really interested in social work. And so for me, it was a toss up between social work and graphic design when I was choosing my.
And then you got to work with somebody like me and you got to put the best of both worlds into one client effort.
Yeah, maybe it's just my way of doing that.
The color psychology thing is really interesting to me. I for decades, people would ask me, what's your favorite color? That's like standard question, right? Everybody wants to know what your favorite color is. And I never had one because I was like, this is not important to me. This is not a priority to me. I legitimately didn't care. But that is apparently not an acceptable answer for a lot of people. And so I felt pressured in my 20s finally. And the one day I literally just said like orange. And it was literally just so people would stop bugging me about it. And so then naturally that became my brand color. But talk about what goes into choosing. What is the psychology or the thought process that goes into choosing a color? How do you decide, oh, you're purple, you're brown, you're yellow, whatever? Where does that come from?
So usually when it comes to like as you know, but not everybody might know, for my design process, I do everything in black and white from the beginning. So that way I know that we're completely focused on the design elements themselves and like the design as its essence rather than, because color, as you know, like it changes it completely, right? And it can even be small little things between like a charcoal gray and black, right? So color definitely can really sway people. So I try to stay away from color until we've definitely got the design to a state where it's like, yep, that's the design. Now let's see. And I've actually had some clients where they're like, you know what? I actually like it better just black or just white on a solid background rather than throwing color into it. Cause color can really change it a lot.
It was interesting to go through that process with you because you were very clear about that in the beginning, that you just do the black and white. And I thought, okay. And at first I wasn't so sure about that, but then, so for me, once we got to the design, then at the end, when you threw the color in, it just like, I took something that I already loved and then you threw in my color and I was like, oh, like it just made it pop that much more. Would I have appreciated it the same if we had gone through color all the way through? I don't know. Would we have even got to that design that we got to if color wasn't in the way? I don't know. So that's why I thought that was a really interesting approach to do that.
When I've found like that's sort of something that I discovered early in my design career, I guess, is that people can be so focused on color. I think
Yep.
just because of like the nature of color, right? That if they don't like orange and you've shown them something in orange and you can't possibly show them in every shade of like that you
Right.
could possibly show them, then they've already dismissed that design. And maybe that was the design that was actually stronger or suited them better, but they got too focused on color. But yeah, like with color, going back to what you asked with kind of how I pick it, I usually start by asking, is there a palette that you're already linked to? Like, so if blues are your thing or whatever it is, and usually I'll stick to that unless there's something else you want to show, and then I'll throw in maybe some colors that I think would lend itself better to the design. And sometimes it actually sways the person from, well, I thought I liked blue, but actually this green is really working, and that like it just, yeah. So sometimes I think that it's just knowing how colors reproduce too, right? Like sometimes people think they want really soft, muted tones, and then they see it and they're like, oh, that's actually better for more of a background or like a supplement color, right? Rather than like a color that you want in the forefront. So yeah, there's definitely with color, I feel like it's just been what I've learned over the years of how people kind of react to it, I guess. And then there's also there is a bit of psychology too, like I said before, about like certain colors definitely provide a different mood. Like I said, if it's in healthcare, you usually stay away from greens or yellows because they kind of make us think of illness. But there's also things like if you go by a lot of dollar stores, it's usually yellow, like bargain type stores.
Yep.
Yellow is used, yellow and black are often used together as more of a bargain type. So sometimes colors can even give a bit of like, almost like there's certain colors I wouldn't use if you're trying to be more high end, or if you don't actually want to be that high end, you want it to be more of a, like a lower, I don't know what the word is there.
You don't want to be a luxury brand that has your image associated with Dollar Tree by nature, or, Dollarama, whatever dollar store by nature of the color of the logo. That makes sense to me. That was actually something that I found really interesting, was when you get into the actual color psychology. So I use a lot of purple in addition to the logo. And I learned that purple can suggest arrogance, profanity, and inferiority. And I was like, oh, good job, Marc. You picked a really great color. That's exactly the story that I want to tell and the image that I want to portray with my brand. But it's interesting to see. And I mean, when you look at, there's literally charts that give you, like, on the positive side, this is what that color means. On the negative side, this is what that color means. I mean, at one point, not knowing any better, I would look at that and think, okay, this is ridiculous. Like, literally somebody just, couldn't sleep one night, indigestion. I'm going to have a profound moment, and I'm going to put this thing out on the internet and say, purple is associated with profanity and whatever, and let's see if it'll go viral. Like, that's literally how I think about it on one side. But then when I hear you talk about the psychology of color, I'm like, you're right. There are certain colors that I do associate with certain things. So it's something that we probably need to put a little bit of thought into. I wouldn't say overthink. Yeah. We probably need to put a little bit of thought into when we're trying to pick our colors. What does orange mean? I don't even know what it means. We never got into that because I never gave you the option. I just told you it's going to be orange.
Yeah, I don't actually. Orange, I don't know exactly what orange means. I know that like purple definitely has a calmness to it. And yeah, like a lot of times you'll find in like royalty and stuff, we'll use purple or like navy blue, like kind of more those tones. So yeah, but I don't know what the psychology with orange is actually.
We're gonna have to look it up now and see. It's interesting to see how some of those associations come together. So let's go back to the beginning. You're working with a client for the first time. Don't use me as an example. I was probably not a great example, but what are some things as the client that we can bring to the table to help make the design process easier? Are there certain things where if I give you this piece of information or I give you that and you're like, oh, this is going to make my job so much easier? Or do you want more of a blank slate to kind of have the freedom to do what you do best and create?
I definitely have people that are on all ends of that scale of things. Like I have some people who are like, this is, I have some people actually draw it out and be like, this is generally what I want, but I need you to show it to me. Like
make it look like it wasn't drawn by a kindergartner.
But then I have other people who are like, I honestly have no idea. I need to see it to know it, kind of thing, right? And sometimes,
which is literally what I said to you. I was like, I don't know what I want, but when you get it, I will know. And I'm like, that's going to make it so easy for her.
Yeah, like as you know, I have my little Q&A thing at the beginning, and I find that the more people can kind of give to that, the better. So again, for people that haven't been through this process with me, like it's very basic questions as far as, like what are the wording that we're including in this, or, but then getting more into the what is the mood you want. So who's your audience? Like, what is it that you're trying to who are you trying to portray to, and what is the feeling that you want? That's a big question and I find that, and you're not the only person who said it feels like therapy, because I've had a number of people be like, I really had to think inside myself and like, what is it that I'm
Yes.
trying to show, right? So and I think that's the human part of what I do, right? Like otherwise you can just go on Fiverr or wherever and get a random logo, right? But like there should be this personal piece where you've had to think about who it is you are and what your business is and what you're trying to offer, so that people recognize that when they see your logo. The last question on my questionnaire is always the one about if there's any styles of logos out there that you love. Send those away to me. So it literally doesn't have to be anything to do with your industry. It's more of like, I've seen this logo and I like that it's, I like the style that it's given or the mood that it's making me feel or whatever. And yeah, like that helps me, because then I at least know what your style is, right? So sometimes, and then it's making that industry work for your industry, basically. Because obviously if you're a yoga studio and you're showing me a logo for a financial investor or something, right? Like those industries are very different. Yep. But maybe there's something about it that's like, okay, I can see what you like about this. You like that it's, whatever, like if it's a certain mood that it's giving, it's like, that's the part you like. And the more that people can show me like the styles of things they like, the easier it is for me sometimes to at least land on, kind of what they're going to want to see. Right. So, because as you know, I try to show some very different concepts from one another at the very beginning, so that then we can pick apart and hone in on what's really working. So that it's not just like, here's your logo and this is all you get.
There's a picture that I had sent, I think I shared with you, where I had all the papers printed out of all the different variations of the logo. Like, I don't even know, you must have had like 40 or 50 variations of the logo. And I had them all, every one of them printed out, laying on the floor in my studio. And I'm standing up like over them, looking down on them, trying to get an aerial view of everything all at once, trying to figure out, I like this one or whatever. And you definitely are really good at variation. The thing that really caught me in the beginning with you was, you had asked me about the logos. I went through your portfolio and, I sent you, I like this, I like this, I like this. And to me, I sent you a collection of completely unrelated logos, just different logos that I thought, oh, I like this. And then you respond back with very clear themes. And I was like, how does she do that? Like literally things that I thought had like this logo does nothing to that logo. This logo has no connection to that logo. And you wrote back and you're like, well, no, I see this theme that's, flowing through your choices. And I'm like, I don't understand how you do that, but that's where the psychology of it comes in. You see things that we don't see, which one of the reasons why I wanted to work with a graphic designer this time was I've used an online service in the past, not Fiverr, but I used an actual online design service in the past. And you kind of give them a little bit of a sense of what you want. You kind of fill out a little bit of a brief. And then a whole bunch of people just have the opportunity to send you their pitches. But there's not really a lot of conversation that goes on. There's not really an opportunity to chat with somebody or to talk through the process or whatever. And I knew this time I wanted to actually be able to have a conversation. I wanted to be able to tap into the expertise that a graphic designer brings. And I think that was one of the things that I really appreciated with you was, first of all, you have the patience of Job. Like, it's just unbelievable how patient you are. But for me, that was probably the most helpful part, was just being able to talk to somebody, have a back and forth conversation. You hear what I'm saying, which makes no sense in my mind, but it makes sense to you. You're able to tell me what I'm actually saying from a graphic design perspective, which then makes it make sense. It was just, it's a so much better way to do the whole entire process. I don't know. I will never do an online service for a logo design ever again. I don't think I'm sold. You convinced me, and hopefully people that are listening will understand that, and they'll want to do the same thing and have that experience of being able to work with somebody, have a conversation with somebody, work through that process.
Well, I think that so much of the way our world is sometimes is in this like online customer service, not like, and sometimes that works, but I think that there's still lots of times where working with an actual person who can like take time and understand what it is that you need out of whatever it is. I don't know, like I said before, I grew up in a hardware store in a small town where I feel like everyone knows each other. You want to have conversation. And so, I don't know, you want to help people, right? So I think that, again, back to that piece of, I was torn between social work and graphic design. So this was like being able to run my business and really get to know people and work with them rather than just working for them, right? Like I want to actually work with you and help, right? So
I think you just answered my next question, because the elephant in the room for creatives right now is obviously AI. And, what is that going to do to the creative industry? Voiceover obviously is not immune to that. There's synthetic voices now, graphic design, Mid-Journey or Sora, or all these different Adobe Firefly, all these different tools that are out there for, generative AI for graphic design. It becomes increasingly commonplace for a lot of these creative tasks. So just get ChatGPT to do it or whatever. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was what the graphic designer brings to the table. Why do we need to choose human? And I think you basically just answered it. It's that ability to converse, to interact, to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
But drawing from your, like for me, it was drawing from your background, your experience, your deep understanding of this whole entire design process. Like, I'm not going to get that typing prompts into ChatGPT. Like it's not, I'm not saying there aren't use cases. There are places where I've used tools like that for sure. But on something like this, when you're creating the thing that is going to be one of the biggest representations of your brand, when you're building your logo, it does not seem like the sort of thing that I want to trust to AI. I want to be able to have that experience and collaboration with a human.
Well, I think that there's going to be ways that even for myself, actually, a couple weeks ago, I used AI for a photo that I needed, because for the longest time, there's stock photography sites. But if you need something very specific, doesn't matter how much you type that in, it doesn't exist. And unless you can actually go out and photograph the thing, then like it can be very difficult. So I did try it to see if I could find it. I needed a very specific picture of a cat. So I typed it in and it landed on something usable. It wasn't exactly what we needed, but we were kind of in a situation where we just needed to get a picture. And so that's how we used it. So I could see in cases like that, it being, like maybe a tool that graphic designers use for something like that. But at the end of the day, I'd still rather get the picture exactly the way I want it. And I don't know if AI will become smart enough to get it exactly the way you want it. Yeah, I could see it being something that, like any technology, when it first comes out, right? It there might be ways that we can use it for good. And not it might have its use, right? Like,
yes, before it takes over and renders us all completely irrelevant and useless. Let's find some ways to use it for good. I mean, I did send you a couple of, and I was very nervous about this. And to be honest with you, I sent you a couple of designs that somebody had sent to me of AI logo designs. And I sent those to you and was like, this is not what I want, but there's certain aspects of this that I kind of get. Because I didn't want you to think, oh, great, he's friggin' going to do an AI logo now or whatever. Because that was not it. Somebody else had listened to me talk about this process. They are obviously a better prompt engineer than I am. And so they typed some stuff into ChatGPT or whatever, and it came up with some stuff. And so I sent it to you and was like, here, like, look at this and let's see what we think. Now, I don't think we actually ended up using anything from that, if I recall, but that was an interesting experiment too, to, maybe, like I've said all along, I use it as a brainstorming buddy, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, and I could see it being that way too, that maybe it's a way to get some different, like almost like how we use Google to research things as well. Like maybe it's just, we use it that way a little bit, but at the end of the day, where it sits right now anyways, you're not going to get exactly what you want from it. Yeah. But I get that the whole idea of AI is that it gets smarter the more we put in it and use it. But I still would like to think that, like, how many people get frustrated because they're dealing with some sort of prompt on a phone call, or like they just want to get to a person on the phone or whatever, right? So I feel like, I think naturally as humans, we still want that human connection with a lot of things. So, and I think that, I don't know, I guess I'd like to think that the younger generations that are being raised on this technology are still gonna crave that piece too. But I guess.
Here's hoping, because that was being able to converse with you, interact with you, have that back and forth collaboration. That made that whole process, like I would pick that over AI for that use case every day of the week. Just for the fun of it, I found orange represents fun, vibrancy, liveliness, and affordable, apparently. So, I mean, affordable is better than cheap, I guess, but I'd found the color wheel. I had one saved somewhere. I was like, because I had looked it up before the interview. And I was like, what did I do with that picture? And so I just found it. So the logo is the most obvious use case for a voice actor from a design standpoint, getting that visual representation of our brand, or that visual representation to help tell our story. But design can certainly factor into more than just our logo. So talk about some of the other design considerations we need to be thinking about when we're marketing ourselves.
Depends on where you're leaving material, right? So if it's like obviously online, there's lots of digital pieces that I do for people to either email out or post on their socials. Then I do a ton of little promo pieces for people, like rack cards or postcards that they can mail out or leave in industries that make sense for them. Like say, if you're a med spa or something and you want to leave rack cards at a doctor's office or something, right? Like there's lots of ways that people use their rack cards, not just as a mail out. I do all kinds of things for people when they're going to, like, I don't know if in your industry, if trade shows are big or not, but like doing banners for people or booth type material. Like even something as simple as a tablecloth with your logo on the front of it, if you had a booth, right? And again, having handouts like at a function like that or an event like that, that would be another use for the rack cards or postcards. I do a lot of things. Again, I don't know if this would fall in your industry or not, but report type things, like if you're wanting to give people information about your business, kind of like an annual thing, let people know what you've done over the year, or different booklets or brochures to hand out. And then some businesses, like I do a lot of work for the Capital 33 in Delhi, and they have tons of events. So there's things that I do for them, like the posters that they put up around town, or booklets that they're giving out to the bands that they're trying to book, and things like that, right? So just kind of depends on what marketing material, who you're kind of trying to talk to. If it's more print based or digital. There's still a lot of people printing stuff. So as much as I know the print industry has changed, there's still a lot of uses for people still like physical things. I think they just like smaller physical things. So it's like they don't want to read like a big booklet on what you do. They want the nitty gritty of what you do. Right?
I have said for a long time that I think there's a really good use case for print today, actually, just in that everybody is doing email, everybody is doing social media, but fewer and fewer people are actually taking advantage of actual physical pieces in the mail, an actual postcard or something like that. And so it might actually be a way that can stand out more than just a traditional email or another social media message or something like that. And so I definitely think there's a use case there. I guess the other thing would just be consistency across the board, right? If you sent me a color palette, and which something I'd never really thought of before. I just, orange, whatever. But you sent me a palette that actually worked in alignment with the logo that we designed. And I was like, oh, okay. So when I'm designing stuff, I should consider using these so that everything kind of looks the same, flows the same, has that brand consistency, so that I can continue to build that recognition with purple and arrogance or whatever it was that it told me.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? People don't realize that the more consistent you are with your material, the more people just recognize it. And again, like we've said it a few times, right? About other popular brands out there, that when you see that material, you know that font without even like realizing that that font, right? So keeping things consistent, whether even if you're doing stuff, like I have lots of clients who I do certain things for them, but they still use Canva to do maybe their social media posts and stuff. But I want them to use that branding board so that everything I'm doing for them, or whether they're doing it, like that it's all consistent, so that people do recognize it all flowing together, right? So it's important for me to see that still flows through, whether I'm creating it or another designer or themselves, right? I just like to see that they've maintained that consistency.
With Canva, which can be a really dangerous place for me. It's where time and productivity go to die, because I can spend hours on Canva, but I can see where you would give me the foundational pieces, right? The logo, the palette, some of those foundational pieces, work with a graphic designer on those. And then, I could go and create all my social media content from there, but working off of the foundational pieces. And so there's a use case for both sides then, right? You work with the graphic designer to kind of give you the initial package, and then you use a tool like Canva or something like that. The danger of Canva is the fonts. That for me, that's the danger of Canva. I could literally spend a week full time just going through fonts, looking for quote unquote the perfect font.
Yes. No, for sure. Well, and I think that I try to, again, and maybe this is because I did grow up working in a family run business in a small town, but I try to be cognizant that like people have a budget that they need to work within, right? So if they can't have me creating everything, I want to be able to help them to still have that consistency, that professionalism, whatever it is, with their brand, so that like if there's things I can help with, obviously I'm happy to do that. And if there's ways for me to help you help, right, then I'm happy to do that as well. So I've even created some templates, like usually just like simple things where it can be templated, but I'll like create it in something that they can go in and just, if say it's something like that they have a monthly event that they run or something. Right. It's like, I can create this template for you, and all you have to do is change the date and nothing else really changes. Like, but a lot of times too, people are like, you know what, I know it only takes you 10 minutes to do it, so I'd also rather you just do it, and I don't have to like you said, worry about the time that it takes them to do it too, right? So
in voiceover, there are trends that are, come and go, change over time. Once upon a time, everybody wanted a big voice announcer. Now being an announcer is like literally the worst thing that you can be in the industry, because that trend is, come and gone. what about in graphic design? There are certain companies, brands that have built their logos and they've been using the same logo for 100 years and it's just completely iconic and whatever. But then you mentioned John Deere's, its logo has evolved over time. Pepsi has, their logo has evolved many times over time. Are there trends that you're seeing right now that if I was going to build a new logo for my business today, I should think about this? And maybe that's a design trend, a color trend, an image trend, whatever. But is there any, like, do you have to pay attention to stuff like that? Or do we need to pay attention to stuff like that?
So I think normally what I would say is when somebody comes to me with their either a rebrand or a new brand, usually, how do I say this? Most people don't want to have to rebrand within the next couple years, right? Like they want it to at least be a little bit timeless. It's rare that like somebody's like, I'm never going to change it, right? But like they want it to, they want to at least have it speak for them for like, whatever it is, like 5-10 years or more, whatever. But so I try not to do, there's specific fonts, I would say for sure, that are very trendy. And I don't usually, unless somebody has asked me to use that specific font, I would usually just stay away from it because I know that that's going to say that was 2024 or that was, so like there's definitely, those are more like your wedding invitation fonts, right? The ones that are used this year and they're not timeless. They don't like, if I want to get super nerdy about fonts here, like a font like Bodoni has stood up like the standard time, right? Like it's always, or something like Garamond, right? Like those are fonts that have just, they're literally from like the initial press days, right? Where they just, if you get really talking to people that work with typefaces, they're like, yes, those are good fonts, right? So there's definitely your classics, and then there's the ones that I'd say color is less trendy in graphic design, as far as there's still going to be your colors of the year, but I'd say that's more of like a wedding industry thing where it's like that this pink is the color this year or something, right? I wouldn't say that I necessarily get requests for like a color that's of the year, right? There's maybe some trends, but for the most part, I think that I find that color reflects more the business itself. And I think that's why, going back to what I was saying earlier, where somebody thinks that, oh, I want a soft palette, but then, or muted tones or something, because that is something that's maybe what they've seen out there in other, like whether it's interior design or something. And then they see it in a logo and they're like, oh yeah, that doesn't work. And it's like, or maybe it does, right? Maybe it works as a background color or something. But yeah.
Not every font can be as timeless as Comic Sans. That's really what it comes down to, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I would say that fonts would be for me what can really show sort of that classic versus like what is happening right now. So yeah, and if you know that somebody's like, you know what, I want something super trendy that's just like a right now kind of thing because we're only open this year or whatever it is, like we're just a pop-up thing or something like that. Maybe that's where you use something that is like a right now kind of look. But most of the time I try to give people at least something that's a bit more solid, standing what is the phrase I'm trying to think of? Stands the time, something about time.
The test of time?
Test of time. There you go. Yes.
So earlier we talked about the advantages of working with a graphic designer, what a graphic designer can bring to the table. Obviously, I had an incredible experience with you. I absolutely recommend anybody that's thinking about getting a logo design, they should contact you. We'll give them some contact information here in a few minutes. But for somebody who is thinking, okay, you've convinced me I want to work with a graphic designer. And what was great about you is that you're local. It's kind of nice to be able to work with somebody local. So maybe they're like, I want to try to find somebody local or whatever. what are some of the considerations that we need to think about in choosing the graphic designer? Are there certain questions that we should be asking, or certifications that they should have? Or is it really about, look through their portfolio, check out some client reviews? Like, what do we need to know in order to make a good decision in hiring a graphic designer?
So as far as so I do have my my RGD, which is an association registered graphic designers of Ontario. And that I achieved by so I went to school, I worked in the industry for, I'm trying to think of when I got it in 2009. So I think I'd been working in the industry for 6 years at that point. And basically that association is just exists to kind of professionalize the graphic design industry,
Right.
kind of sets apart from just anybody who says that they can draw something up, I guess, right? Because there's a lot of there's interviews, portfolio reviews, testing, all that kind of stuff that I had to do to get it. So it wasn't an easy process. It was work to get it. And you have to have so many, I can't remember. I think you have to have 5 years of being in the industry before you can even apply to have it. And so many years of school. I think that as far as picking a graphic designer, it really, having my RGD to me was an achievement, but it's not if somebody doesn't have it, it's not you have to be oh, I'm not going to work with them, or it's not it shouldn't be like that by any means. It was more just a professional achievement that I wanted to make for myself, and be part of that association, like I said. So I think that when picking a graphic designer, I think that you should have that good vibe with them, obviously, right? Especially if it's something where you want it to be personal and you so like I said, I like that. I like being able to offer everybody the experience rather than just being I'm designing this for you and here's your logo. I want it to be more of an experience.
I just think when we're going through this process, it's on the voiceover side, there are a lot of people out there who call themselves voiceover coaches, because in order to call yourself a voiceover coach, all you need is a social media profile and, the ability to convince somebody that you're an expert. And so if you're really good at online marketing, you could, in theory, know absolutely nothing about voiceover, but sell yourself as a voiceover coach because you've got an Instagram channel, or you've got a YouTube channel. And so we have to find ways as voice actors to protect ourselves against, working with people that are like that, who make it sound like they know what they're doing, but they don't actually know what they're doing. And so that's why I think understanding from somebody who's in the graphic design industry, who has been in the graphic design industry for a while, being able to help us to just discern, okay, so maybe they don't specifically have this certification, or they don't have that particular thing, but look for this, here's a red flag or whatever. It just helps us to make a better decision. But it's absolutely worth the experience of working with a human on something like your logo design. I can't say that enough, having just gone through the process.
Well, and I think what you said earlier too, you asked, I do think reviewing portfolio is key. Cause then at least you'll see I know my portfolio is very varied, so it's probably easier for someone to look at it and see that you can maybe fit into a certain style. But there's certain designers that maybe they have a very specific style and that might not fit with you, right? So I think reviewing their portfolio is probably key. There's also times where I try to stay connected with other designers in the area too, so that I can say, you know what, that's not necessarily my best thing to offer you, but I know for sure this person, that's totally in their wheelhouse. And as much as I'd love to work with you, I really think that they're your person for that. Right. And so I think that, I recommend those people to people as well, because I know they do the same thing. And I think that even just knowing that someone is like that, I think just, I don't know. it's more of a community feel, right? Like, you know, that I'm not looking to cut anyone out. And I'd rather know that
Yep.
I've directed you to the right person rather than be like, oh yeah, I'm the one-stop shop that can do it all. Cause I don't agree with that. I don't think any designer should be able to say they can do it all, because I don't think anyone can say that in any industry. Right. So
The willingness to say no to someone, I think, is really important, and to refer them, like, you know what, this person might be better for you. I have a lot of respect for that as well. So if somebody is interested in working with you, wants to check out your portfolio, maybe wants to have a quick chat with you to figure out whether or not you might be the right fit, if they're looking to get a logo designed, how do we get connected with you online? Where's the best place to find you?
So my website would be ksdesign.ca. Through there, you can hit my socials, my emails on there. That's usually the best place to direct, because then at least I know you've got all the information there. But yeah, obviously my socials, it would be my whole name, which I know some people have. Sinkowski is not the easiest name to spell out, but it'd be Katie Sinkowski Design, are my handles on Facebook and Instagram. So.
I will make sure to put links to everything in the show notes as well, so that makes it really easy for people to find. But Katie, this has been really great. I really want to thank you for taking the time to come and talk with us. I know you're probably like, what the heck is this guy doing asking me to be on a voiceover podcast? But I think that this is really good information for voice actors to have, because the design side of things, you know, coming up with your logo, coming up with your business card, all of that sort of stuff, it's really important. And they're decisions that really do reflect on you as a voice actor when you're putting yourself out there publicly. Like, I can tell when, you know, somebody went and printed a stock business card from, you know, stock business card site or whatever. And not to say that that's good or bad or indifferent, just to say that I can tell. But then I can also tell when somebody's made an investment in, you know, getting a logo professionally developed, or getting a business card professionally made, or working with somebody to come up with a thoughtful brand that tells their story. And so those things do stand out, and they do make a difference. So thank you for coming and sharing your expertise and wisdom with us. I truly do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.